Welcome to Crime Story Chronicles. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button for more eerie true crime mysteries. And to all our returning viewers, thank you for being part of this journey into the darkest corners of human nature. Tonight, we venture into the rarefied world of high-end art, where beauty masks betrayal, and where a single brushstroke can mean the difference between fortune and ruin. In the heart of Manhattan's elite gallery district, where million-dollar masterpieces hang like silent witnesses, one man's final moments would expose a web of deception that had been carefully painted over for years. It was just before midnight on October 15, 2023, when the motion sensors at the prestigious Moreau Gallery triggered their final alert of the evening. Inside, Julien Moreau, a man who had spent 3 decades building his reputation as one of New York's most influential art dealers, lay dying among his carefully curated collection. But this wasn't a robbery gone wrong, and it wasn't a crime of passion. This was something far more calculated, far more sinister. The question that would haunt investigators for months wasn't who had access to the gallery that night. It was who among Julien's trusted circle had been planning his death all along. To understand Julien Moreau's final night, we must first understand the world he inhabited. A world where authenticity is everything, and where the line between legitimate business and something darker often blurs like watercolors in the rain. The Moreau Gallery wasn't just another high-end art space. It was a sanctuary for collectors who valued discretion as much as they valued beauty. Julien had built his empire on trust, on his ability to source pieces that others couldn't find, pieces that came with questions that were better left unasked. But in the art world, secrets have a way of surfacing like hidden signatures beneath layers of paint. Detective Alex Thompson would later tell me that Julien's death scene was unlike anything he'd encountered in his 15 years with the NYPD. Most crime scenes tell a story, he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen too much. But this one was like trying to read a book where every page was written in a different language. What made it even more unsettling was the painting. A half-finished portrait that seemed to watch over Julien's body like a guardian angel that had arrived too late. Marcus Chen had been working security at the Moreau Gallery for 8 years. He knew every creak of the hardwood floors, every shadow cast by the carefully positioned spotlights. His routine was sacred, a methodical walk through each room, checking locks, ensuring the climate control systems were functioning perfectly. Art, after all, is fragile, and Julien Moreau was obsessive about preservation. But nothing could have prepared Marcus for what he discovered that night. "I smelled it first," Marcus would later tell investigators, his hands trembling as he recalled that moment. This sweet, chemical smell that didn't belong. The gallery usually smells like old money and fresh flowers. But this was different. Wrong. He followed the scent to the main exhibition hall, where Julien's latest acquisition, a disputed Monet water lily painting, hung in place of honor. Beneath it, Julien Moreau sat slumped in his favorite leather chair, the one he'd positioned to have the perfect view of his collection. What struck Marcus most wasn't Julien's stillness. It was the expression on his face. He looked satisfied, Marcus remembered. Like he'd just solved a puzzle that had been bothering him for years. But puzzles, in Julien's world, were rarely solved without consequence. The chemical smell grew stronger as Marcus approached, and when he saw the overturned glass beside Julien's chair, its contents spilled across the antique Persian rug, he knew he was looking at something far more sinister than a natural death. Marcus's call to 911 lasted exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds. In that brief conversation, he would describe a scene that would launch one of the most complex investigations in NYPD history. Not because of what was obviously wrong, but because of what was subtly out of place. The half-finished painting on the easel near Julien's body wasn't part of the gallery's collection. It wasn't signed, wasn't framed, wasn't catalogued. It was simply there, like a message left by someone who knew it would be found. Detective Alex Thompson wasn't your typical homicide investigator. With a master's degree in art history from Columbia and a minor in chemistry, he'd carved out a unique niche within the NYPD, cases that required someone who could read between the brushstrokes. When the call came in about Julien Moreau's death, Thompson was the obvious choice. What he didn't expect was how personal this case would become. "I'd heard of Julian Moreau long before I became a cop," Thompson confided to me during our interview. "In art circles, he was legendary. The man who could find pieces that museums had given up on, who had connections that stretched from private collectors in Tokyo to auction houses in London. But there were always whispers, always questions about how he managed to acquire certain pieces." Thompson's academic background had taught him that in the art world, provenance, the history of ownership, was everything. Without it, even the most beautiful painting was worthless. Thompson's first walk through the crime scene took over 2 hours. He photographed every angle, every shadow, every piece of evidence that might tell the story of Julian's final moments. But it was the painting that captivated him. A portrait of a woman with haunting eyes, her face emerging from layers of paint that seemed to shift in the gallery's ambient lighting. "It was like she was trying to tell me something," Thompson later recalled. "But I couldn't understand the language she was speaking." The forensic team's initial findings were puzzling. Julian had been poisoned. That much was clear from the preliminary tests. But the poison wasn't something you could pick up at a hardware store or order online. It was cyanide, but not the type typically used in suicide cases or even most homicides. This was a specific compound, one that had been modified with other chemicals to mask its smell and delay its effects. Someone with knowledge of chemistry had planned this carefully. But why use such an elaborate method when simpler approaches would have been just as effective? The glass that had contained Julian's final drink told its own story. Residue analysis revealed traces of expensive brandy, Julian's favorite, a 40-year-old Armagnac that he kept locked in his office safe. But mixed with the brandy were compounds that shouldn't have been there. Potassium cyanide, yes, but also traces of turpentine, linseed oil, and something else that the lab couldn't immediately identify. It was as if someone had turned Julian's drink into a painter's palette, but instead of creating art, they had created death. Julian Moreau's world was populated by a carefully curated collection of individuals. Artists, collectors, critics, and dealers who moved through his gallery like pieces in an elaborate chess game. Each had their own motivations, their own secrets, their own reasons for being in Julian's orbit. As Detective Thompson began interviewing those closest to the victim, a picture emerged of a man who inspired both admiration and fear, sometimes in the same conversation. Isabella Rossi had been Julian's latest discovery, a talented young artist whose work bridged the gap between classical techniques and contemporary themes. 6 months earlier, Julian had offered her a solo exhibition, the kind of opportunity that could launch a career or destroy it, depending on the reviews. But their relationship had soured dramatically just weeks before Julian's death, and the reasons why would prove to be more complex than anyone initially suspected. "Julian could be demanding," Isabella told me, choosing her words carefully. "He had very specific ideas about what art should be, about what would sell to his clientele. When I refused to change my style to match his vision, he became different, cold. Like I'd betrayed him personally." The argument that ended their professional relationship had been witnessed by several gallery employees, and its intensity had surprised everyone who thought they knew Julian as a sophisticated, controlled man. What made Isabella particularly interesting to Detective Thompson wasn't just her artistic talent or her falling out with Julian. It was her knowledge of art restoration chemicals. Her studio, located just 12 blocks from the gallery, was filled with the tools of her trade. Solvents, fixatives, and yes, compounds that could be dangerous in the wrong hands. When Thompson asked her about her whereabouts on the night of Julian's death, her answer was vague enough to be suspicious but specific enough to be believable. Isabella claimed she had been home alone that evening, working on a new piece for a group exhibition. The security footage from her building confirmed her arrival, but it also revealed something else. She had been carrying a bag that seemed heavier than usual, and her usual confident stride appeared hurried, almost anxious. When pressed about the bag's contents, Isabella's explanation was simple. "Art supplies. I'd been to the store earlier." But which store and what kind of supplies remained questions that would haunt the investigation. The financial relationship between Isabella and Julian was more complicated than a simple artist-dealer arrangement. Records showed that Julian had been supporting Isabella's work for over a year, not just through the promise of an exhibition but through direct monthly payments that exceeded what most galleries would provide to unknown artists. It was the kind of arrangement that suggested either exceptional confidence in her talent or something else entirely. The last payment, made just a week before Julian's death, was significantly larger than the others, and it came with a memo that simply read, "Final consideration." It was while examining Julian's private office that Detective Thompson discovered the first piece of evidence that would completely change the direction of the investigation. Hidden behind a false panel in Julian's desk was a collection of documents that painted a very different picture of the respected art dealer. These weren't gallery receipts or insurance papers. They were authentication reports, shipping manifests, and correspondence that suggested Julian Moreau had been involved in something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The documents revealed a sophisticated operation involving art forgeries, but not the typical kind that most people imagine. These weren't crude copies painted in someone's garage and sold to unsuspecting tourists. These were museum-quality reproductions, created by master forgers and passed off as authentic pieces to collectors who paid millions for the privilege of owning them. The operation was so sophisticated that even experts had been fooled, and Julian's gallery had been at its center for at least 5 years. The financial records were staggering. Over the past 5 years, the Moreau Gallery had facilitated the sale of at least 30 pieces that were now confirmed to be forgeries. The total value of these transactions exceeded $20 million, with Julian's personal take being approximately $4 million. But here's what made Detective Thompson's investigation take a crucial turn. Julian hadn't been working alone. The documents clearly showed payments to multiple individuals, including what appeared to be a business partner whose identity was carefully obscured through a web of shell companies and offshore accounts. Julian's phone records from the week before his death told a story of increasing desperation. Multiple calls to the same untraceable number, each conversation lasting longer than the last. The final call, made just hours before his death, had lasted 47 minutes, an eternity in Julian's normally efficient world. When Thompson's team managed to trace the number, they discovered it belonged to a burner phone that had been purchased with cash just days earlier. Someone had been very careful to avoid leaving a digital trail. Among Julian's personal papers, Thompson found a handwritten note that would prove to be crucial to understanding the motive behind his murder. The note, written in Julian's distinctive handwriting, suggested that Isabella Rossi had discovered something about the forgery operation. But it also revealed something else. Julian had been prepared to take drastic action to protect his business, even if it meant destroying an innocent person's career and reputation. The trail of evidence led Detective Thompson to Marcus Vance, Julian's business partner and co-owner of the Moreau Gallery. On the surface, Marcus appeared to be everything Julian was not: young, tech-savvy, focused on the business side of art dealing rather than the aesthetic aspects. He had joined the gallery 5 years earlier, bringing with him a network of international contacts and a sophisticated understanding of digital marketing that had helped expand the gallery's reach exponentially. When Thompson first interviewed Marcus, he presented himself as a grieving partner who had lost not just a business associate but a mentor. "Julian taught me everything about the art world," Marcus had said, his voice breaking slightly. "He saw potential in me when others just saw a businessman trying to profit from culture." But as Thompson dug deeper into Marcus's background, a different picture began to emerge, one of a man whose ambitions had slowly consumed his ethics. Marcus's financial records revealed a web of international connections that made Julian's operation look simple by comparison. Through a series of shell companies based in countries with favorable banking privacy laws, Marcus had been facilitating art transactions that totaled over $50 million in the past 3 years alone. What made these transactions suspicious wasn't their size. Legitimate art dealing often involved large sums, but their structure. Each transaction was designed to obscure the true ownership of the pieces being sold, making it nearly impossible to trace their provenance. Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the world's leading experts in art authentication, provided Thompson with crucial insight into how sophisticated forgery operations work. "The most successful forgers aren't just artists," she explained. They're art historians, chemists, and businesspeople rolled into one. They understand not just how to replicate brushstrokes and color palettes, but how to age canvases, how to create fake provenance documents, and most importantly, how to identify collectors who won't ask too many questions. The breakthrough in the case came when the lab results on the mysterious half-finished painting finally arrived. The paint samples revealed something extraordinary. The painting had been created using pigments that matched those found in several pieces sold by the Moreau Gallery over the past 2 years. But more importantly, the chemical signature of the paint matched samples taken from Isabella Rossi's studio. This wasn't just any painting. It was Isabella's work, but it had been altered by someone else, someone who had access to the same materials and techniques. Through a combination of security footage, phone records, and financial documentation, Detective Thompson was able to piece together the events of October 15th. What emerged was a story of two partners whose relationship had deteriorated from mutual trust to deadly betrayal. Julian had discovered that Marcus was planning to expose their forgery operation to the FBI in exchange for immunity, a betrayal that would have destroyed Julian's reputation and sent him to prison for the rest of his life. Marcus had arrived at the gallery that evening under the pretense of discussing their exit strategy from the forgery business. He brought with him a bottle of Julian's favorite Armagnac, supposedly as a peace offering. What Julian didn't know was that Marcus had spent weeks researching the perfect poison for his plan, something that would be difficult to detect and would give him time to establish an alibi. The cyanide compound he chose was derived from art restoration chemicals, a cruel irony that wasn't lost on Detective Thompson. The phone records revealed that Marcus had called his attorney at 11:52 p.m., just minutes after leaving the gallery. The conversation, which lasted only 90 seconds, was carefully worded to avoid any admission of guilt while establishing that Marcus had been concerned about Julian's mental state, and had tried to talk him out of making any rash decisions. It was the kind of calculated move that suggested Marcus had been planning this conversation for weeks. The half-finished painting that had puzzled investigators from the beginning finally revealed its secrets under ultraviolet light. Hidden within the layers of paint were messages written in a substance that was invisible to the naked eye but glowed under UV examination. The messages, written in Julian's handwriting, detailed the forgery operation and specifically named Marcus as the mastermind. It was Julian's insurance policy. His way of ensuring that if anything happened to him, the truth would eventually come to light. Marcus Vance was arrested on November 3, 2023, at his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. The arrest came after weeks of surveillance that revealed Marcus had been attempting to liquidate his assets and establish new identities in countries without extradition treaties. When Thompson's team executed the search warrant, they found evidence of the forgery operation, including authentication equipment, detailed records of fake provenance documents, and most damning of all, a second bottle of the same rare Armagnac that had been used to poison Julian. The Marcus Vance who sat across from Detective Thompson in the interview room was a far cry from the sophisticated art dealer who had helped build the Moreau Gallery's reputation. The carefully maintained facade had cracked, revealing a man consumed by paranoia and greed. He kept talking about reputation, Thompson told me. How everything he'd built would be destroyed, how he'd be ruined. But he never once mentioned Julian as a person, never showed any remorse for taking a life. It was all about what he stood to lose. Dr. Michael Torres, the forensic psychiatrist assigned to evaluate Marcus, provided insight into the psychological factors that had driven him to murder. Marcus exhibited classic signs of narcissistic personality disorder combined with antisocial tendencies, Dr. Torres explained. He saw people, including Julian, as objects to be manipulated rather than as human beings with intrinsic value. When Julian became a threat to his self-image and lifestyle, eliminating him seemed like a logical business decision. Julian's sister Marie provided a victim impact statement that revealed the personal cost of Marcus's crimes. Julian wasn't perfect, she said, her voice steady despite her tears. He got involved in things that were wrong, things that ultimately led to his death. But he was trying to get out, trying to make things right. Marcus robbed him of that chance at redemption, and he robbed our family of the opportunity to help Julian find his way back to the man we knew he could be. The revelation of the Moreau Gallery forgery operation sent shockwaves through the international art community. Museums were forced to re-evaluate pieces in their collections. Collectors faced the devastating realization that their prized acquisitions might be worthless, and the entire system of art authentication came under scrutiny. The scandal ultimately led to the recovery of over 30 forged pieces and the implementation of new technologies designed to prevent similar frauds in the future. Isabella Rossi, who had been cleared of all suspicion once the truth emerged, found herself in an unexpected position. The publicity surrounding the case had made her work famous, but not in the way she had hoped. "I became known as the artist who almost went to prison for a murder she didn't commit," she told me. "It's not exactly the kind of reputation that helps you sell paintings." Despite the challenges, Isabella has continued to create art, though she admits that the experience changed her relationship with the art world forever. Marcus Vance was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge, in delivering the sentence, noted that Marcus's crimes had damaged not just the immediate victims but an entire industry built on trust and authenticity. "You didn't just kill Julian Moreau," Judge Patricia Williams said. "You killed the faith that collectors, museums, and artists had in the integrity of the art market." Today, the Moreau Gallery operates under new management, with strict authentication protocols and a commitment to transparency that Julian and Marcus's operation never had. The half-finished painting that provided the key to solving Julian's murder hangs in a place of honor, not as a piece of art but as a reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of beauty. The gallery's new director, Dr. Amanda Chen, has made it her mission to restore trust in the institution while honoring the legitimate aspects of Julian's legacy. As I walked through the streets of Manhattan's Gallery District while researching this case, I couldn't help but wonder how many other operations like Julian and Marcus's are still operating in the shadows. The art world, with its emphasis on discretion and its culture of unquestioned authenticity, provides the perfect cover for those who would exploit trust for profit. How many collectors are unknowingly displaying forgeries? How many museums have been deceived by sophisticated fraud? Special Agent Rachel Morrison of the FBI's art crime team provided sobering insight into the scope of art fraud. "The Moreau Gallery case is just the tip of the iceberg," she explained. "We estimate that forgeries account for 10 to 15% of all art sales worldwide, representing billions of dollars in fraud annually. The problem is that most victims never know they've been deceived, and when they do find out, they often choose to remain silent rather than face the embarrassment and financial loss." Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this case isn't the murder itself, but what it reveals about our relationship with authenticity. If a forgery is so perfect that even experts can't detect it, if it brings the same aesthetic pleasure as the original, what makes the authentic piece more valuable? Is it the artist's touch, the historical significance, or simply our knowledge that it's real? Julian Moreau's death forces us to confront these questions, and the answers are far from comfortable. When I asked Detective Thompson what he learned from the Moreau case, his answer was both profound and disturbing. "I learned that in the art world, as in life, nothing is ever exactly what it appears to be. Every painting has layers, every transaction has hidden meanings, and every relationship can be a carefully constructed forgery." Julian Moreau spent his career teaching people to look beyond the surface of art to find its true meaning. In the end, someone looking beyond the surface of his life found reasons to kill him. The painting that Julian Moreau was working on in his final days remains unfinished, a haunting reminder of dreams cut short and secrets finally revealed. Art historians have debated whether it should be completed by another artist or left as Julian intended it, a permanent question mark in the middle of an otherwise polished gallery. The decision, ultimately, was to leave it as Julian left it, incomplete but somehow perfect in its imperfection. Julian Moreau's memorial service was attended by hundreds of people from the art world, though many came as much out of curiosity as respect. The service itself was a study in contradictions, tributes to Julian's eye for beauty mixed with acknowledgments of his flawed judgment, celebrations of his contributions to the art world shadowed by the knowledge of his crimes. It was, in many ways, The perfect memorial for a man who had lived his life in the gray areas between right and wrong. In his final interview before being transferred to federal prison, Marcus Vance showed no remorse for his actions. When asked if he regretted killing Julian, his response was chilling in its simplicity. "I regret getting caught." It was a statement that perfectly encapsulated the cold calculation that had driven him to murder, the complete absence of empathy that had made him capable of betraying someone who had trusted him completely. As night falls over the gallery district, the questions raised by Julian Moreau's death continue to echo through the art world. How many other Marcus Vances are out there, hiding behind sophisticated facades and trusted relationships? How many other Julian Moreaus are struggling with the consequences of choices made in pursuit of success and recognition? The art world, like the paintings it celebrates, is full of hidden layers, and sometimes those layers conceal truths that are far darker than anyone wants to acknowledge. Isabella Rossi continues to paint, though her work has evolved significantly since the events surrounding Julian's death. Her new pieces explore themes of truth and deception, authenticity and forgery, using techniques that deliberately blur the line between what's real and what's constructed. Julian's death taught me that authenticity isn't just about the materials you use or the techniques you employ, she told me. It's about being honest about who you are and what you're trying to say, even when that honesty comes with a cost. The Moreau Gallery, under its new management, has become a symbol of redemption and renewal in the art world. Dr. Amanda Chan has implemented revolutionary authentication technologies and established partnerships with law enforcement agencies to prevent future fraud. But perhaps more importantly, she has created a culture of transparency that would have been impossible under Julian and Marcus's regime. "We can't change what happened here," she says, "but we can make sure it never happens again." The death of Julian Moreau serves as a stark reminder that behind every beautiful facade, there may be ugly truths waiting to be discovered. In the art world, as in life, authenticity comes with a price, and that price is sometimes higher than anyone is willing to pay. But perhaps that's the most important lesson of all. That truth, like art, is worth preserving, even when it's painful, even when it's dangerous, even when it costs everything. The brushstrokes of betrayal that painted Julian Moreau's final chapter are a testament to the power of secrets to destroy lives, but they're also a reminder that truth, like great art, has a way of enduring long after those who would suppress it are gone. In the end, the most authentic thing about Julian Moreau's life may have been his death. Honest, brutal, and impossible to forge. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the dark heart of the art world. If this case has taught us anything, it's that the line between beauty and corruption is often thinner than we'd like to believe. What do you think? Could you have spotted the deception in Julian's world, or would you have been fooled by the carefully constructed facade? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more investigations into the cases that reveal the darkest aspects of human nature. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most beautiful surfaces hide the ugliest truths, and the most trusted faces can conceal the most dangerous intentions. Stay curious, stay questioning, and never assume that what you see is all there is to see. This has been Crime Story Chronicles. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the shadows of the next case.